Welcome to the PB&J podcast, where we talk about topics and issues relevant to the church today. Before we begin this episode, be sure to be sure to subscribe, and also share this. It really helps with the channel. We really appreciate it. And also leave a comment, either down below or through social media or through email, if that's your thing. We'll have the information in the description. Let us know what you think about this episode, and also let us know if you have any ideas about what you'd like us to talk about. And with that, we're glad you're with us on this episode. Let's jump in. Like, what you're saying is really interesting, because I'm sure for a lot of people it might sound like a bit controversial and a bit touchy on the surface. And just as a side note, before I get to my real point, I would say I think a sensitivity to that, like feeling touchy about it, is probably more to do with just the political climate and not actually what Black Liberation Theology is about. Uh, but I also want to say that it actually sounds a lot like what Paul was wrestling with his churches there, where people were saying, like, no, like, you really need to be a Jew in order to be a true Christian. It sounds like
Yeah.
just a reiteration of the same thing,
Well,
where people maybe unintentionally, but sort of included their own cultural backgrounds, such as, certain paintings and images, because that's how they saw the world, right? Like, European people, they only knew white people, and so to them that's what God looked like. And they accidentally, in some cases, purposefully in others, sort of impose that onto other people and saying, no, you have to worship God this way, and include all of those habits and all those structures and, even the images, because that's who God is, that sounds a lot like what Paul was doing, which is like, no, you have to be able to separate those things and understand that, God he's not just like that.
So Ben, are you saying that Black Liberation Theology is a biblical theology?
I don't have a.
No, I'm just kidding. I'm just messing with you, dude. I'm sorry. I know you can't like commit to stuff because but I had to do it. You can cut that out of the podcast and then hate me forever. I deserve it. But like,
no, like, yeah, I would, like, because I mentioned before, like, I have heard it before. I'm not too familiar with it, so thank you for articulating it better. I did know it had some connection with the Exodus narrative, but I didn't know beyond that what it was. But I really admire, like, what you're saying. And like, I did find it interesting, like, when I lived in Kenya, how you'd go to the store, and I actually loved it. I would go into these stores that would have these paintings and images and stuff, and everywhere I looked, Jesus was African, like specifically East African. Like, he would wear like the headdress stuff. Like I have a crucifix actually where Jesus has on I forget what it's called, a little hat on your head that they wear over there. Like, he's wearing one of those, and like his
Oh, you gotta go get it. I need to see it.
yeah. I'll get it once we're done recording. But
Okay.
but also, like, when I first went into that store, I saw all these paintings. I thought they were all like photo negatives at first, because everyone was black instead of white. Because I didn't realize myself, growing up in the States, that I just got used to seeing it that way. It's not that I did it intentionally. I just got used to it. And then when I started seeing how, like, they're all African, people over there are pretty dark. And so, yeah, to them, it makes sense that God would look like them. So why am I assuming that God has to look a certain way? Now, of course, you get to the historical stuff. Yeah, Jesus was Middle Eastern, but I like your larger point, which is, yeah, but God, the Father, is spirit. He's formless. And so we shouldn't assume that
he's as much white as he is black, as he is
that.
Latino, as he is, Middle Eastern, as he is Chinese. Yeah. It doesn't matter. East Asian, South Pacific, doesn't matter. That's who God is. All those things simultaneously and also none at the same time, if that makes sense.
And we have to also take in the historical painting of, if I'm saying right, Michelangelo.
Yeah, the Sistine Chapel.
The Sistine Chapel
with Adam.
And the scene where God is touching Adam, and he made God into this white guy, and with the white beard,
white Italian dude.
And this is why I think the theology cannot be separated from a worldview, because worldview have always contributed into the modern theology as we know it today.
Yeah.
Artists have movies. I did a class actually, which I think both of you would actually have enjoyed the heck out of it, but it was called The Theology in Hollywood.
Interesting.
So we talked about Star Wars. We talked about other different type of movies, and the theology that establishing with it, because every director, every producer, or whatever has a message, a euangelion message, a good news message that is trying to be presented within this movie, and now it's up to us as the viewer to try to grab and like, what is the message? What is the message? And so when we talk about the father being a white guy and stuff, it's because we have that image in our head of
Hmm.
this old, muscular,
Bearded dude.
sexy white guy, white beard, about to touch Adam, and it's like, well, God must be that.
Hmm.
But truly, that was just Michelangelo watch this interpretation of it. But Maya Angelou could have done that, a black guy, a brown guy, and would it still have the same power? And so that's what James Cone really does for a lot of black people, and but for myself, he really saved me, guys. He really saved me, because when I had that experience at Olivet, I was really ready to leave the faith.
Hmm.
And I don't know if it necessarily leave the faith rather than leave the church,
Mm.
the big C. I was ready to leave because I had people like, I'm not ashamed to say it. At that time, remember, Barack Obama was running for president. Okay. So black people were going crazy for Barack Obama. So I was one that was going crazy for Barack Obama, being a black man and stuff, and at that time, and I remember having conversations with students and uh, um, and staff. You know what they would tell me? You cannot be a Democrat and be a Christian.
I strongly disagree, Sylvester Knight, and we have talked about this many a times.
Yeah,
Sorry.
oh, you can. Yeah, you cannot be a Democrat and be Christian, and that's why when you guys were having a conversation, I think you guys need to do a part three, honestly, of fundamentalism, because it's this driving also this force of how not just the politics of it, but also the race and the race part plays a part into it, because it's a school. What's the name of the school? John. Oh, it's a Christian school. Jones.
Bob Jones.
Jones.
Bob Jones in
Bob
Florida.
Jones.
That crazy school.
Yeah. So I
Yeah, that
don't. Do
place
you
is
guys
crazy.
know that it was just like, I kid you not. I don't know the exact number, but just a few years ago, that they allow interracial couples.
I actually was unaware of that. I try not to pay attention to Bob Jones University because I think that calling them a school is an insult to higher education. Um, that's really harsh, but like some of the stuff that they practice and some of their fundamentalism is like it to me is like
Yeah.
insane to me. It's like it literally it's a trick. Like I hate to use this word because it's such a stereotype, but it really does trigger me in such a way that I like fly off the handle in rage. Like I really makes me very squirmy, if you can tell, talking about Bob Jones University and those kind of
Yeah.
places. Like that's not education, that's indoctrination, and that's literally what like we don't have time. Yes, it's. I hear you, Sylvester. I hear you.
Yeah. But
It's getting a little hot in here now.
yeah, the way you feel about Bob Jones is like, that's how I feel about somewhat the evangelical practice across the board, because sometimes I see it more as a, I love how you said that, indoctrination of somewhat of a cult.
Can I ask some
Which,
questions when you're done?
yes, I'm done.
No, finish your thing, man. Indoctrination as a
No,
cult.
well, I was just going to say, and when I use the word cult, please do not feel, um, do not get squirmy on me, the listeners, because the way I use cult is technically is not a bad term. It's
Extremely.
just bad when you misuse it. So if you actually look at it, we all are a part of a cult. This is where you get culture from. Culture, we all part of a culture, which is cult that has been nurtured over time. So when you look at it, it's, if you're Jewish or whatever, technically you're just doing rituals and habits that have been passed on from over time, that have been nurtured over time, that is continuing to be passed on. So cult is technically not a bad thing. I mean, I don't want to get too radical here, so I'm not going to say what I want to say, but um, 'cause I don't want Ben have to like, okay, that was crazy. Okay, so I have a lot to fix here. But no, go ahead, Jordan. You say you have some
No,
questions.
man, because like I want to genuinely know, and so all right, I want to make sure I hear the spirit and the actual like content and belief of Black liberation theology. And I know we can't summarize it all in one because it's like any academic field, it's an amoeba, right? It's constantly morphing and shifting and this kind of debating and growing. But at its core, it is trying to combat the historical dominance of of white language of historically and culturally white language in Christian theology, specifically evangelicalism, in ways that are subtly exclusive of the Black experience. An example I would say would be something like, well, I can only give from my personal experience. It was hard for me to see God to give justice in tangible ways early on in my life because I had only understood God's justice in a spiritual way. And I mean
Mm,
that like the physical like redemption and things were like really like it
mm,
was so foreign to me because I thought that, oh no, God just fixes the spiritual stuff. And that was what we talked about at the beginning of the podcast, the inside out stuff, right? Like, oh, I fixed that, everything's gonna be fine. And so like it was easy for me to ignore those things because I thought only God only cared about the heart rather than the whole, if that makes sense. And like
wow. Yeah.
it,
Yeah.
and it's in those ways like that would be an example of, oh, because I only think God cares about that. Well, yeah, Sylvester, I know that you live in poverty and I know that you had it rough growing up in Chicago, but like, like ultimately, like if you're a Christian, you're saved. So like, yeah, it sucks right now, but like, it'll be fine. It's gonna be fine, man. Like just keep believing. Just like hang in there, buddy. Like like
And the world's
I'll
falling
like
apart anyways, so
yeah,
what does it
exactly.
matter?
Yeah, exactly. And that's and like is it like that kind of stuff that's pushing you? Say more obviously, but like is that an example of
Yeah.
something? I don't know. Maybe I'm off.
You No, you hit it on the nail. The only thing I would add on, not subtract, add on, is that it's just not white language. Is white physical visual images
Hmm.
that have been portrayed over time to keep the mind of black Christians to um, stay under rather than seeing themselves as equal. So that's one. And two, when you say the concept of, well, just hang in there,
Yeah, sorry,
it
that was really
really is. And that's
patronizing.
why,
I don't actually believe
no,
that for the
no,
record, for the listeners.
no, but this is, no, it's true because it's this concept of, as I like to call them, the back against the wall Christians. They're like, look, I'm just doing just enough to get my ticket to heaven.
Hmm.
And I have a problem with that because when the prayer says, "Let Thy kingdom come, Thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven," then that means that we are giving the task to try our best. Not, Black liberation theology, we say, we don't know if we will ever fully get there, but try our best to create this image of heaven onto earth as it is in heaven. So it should not just be waiting until we get to heaven to find justice, but we can find justice on earth because that is what God designed for us to do, and that's what God have tasked us to do. So we cannot just go and just say, well, you know, just wait till you get to heaven, and because if we just wait until we get to heaven, well, how do I get to be here with Jordan and Ben as a black man
Hmm.
if we were just waiting to get to heaven? So it pushes back on that evangelical notion that all we should be worrying about is getting to heaven, get it to heaven, get to heaven. Yeah, heaven is the ultimate goal, but what are you doing now on earth to help and to liberate the oppressed? Are you feeding the homeless? And when I say that, I don't want us to think of the black people, but also the hungry, the thirsty, the naked. Are we putting that in practice into loving on them as God will call us to do it?
Well, I'll even up the ante for you, man, on that point. When you said the ultimate goal is even to get to heaven, I would say that our ultimate goal is absolute piety to the faith, right? Like it's of piety to the person of Jesus Christ. And that like I think our primary concerns would be our obedience to him and the inbreaking of his
Yeah.
kingdom. And then I think heaven comes because we'll be in a Christian community upon the resurrection. I don't know. I think it's really compelling when we keep a vision, a powerful eschatology, a vision of that resurrection life and that society that we're going to live in and that redeemed state
Mm,
and what that means and what that is going to look like for us. And I think when we see that and we talk about, the Lord's Prayer, which is what you're quoting, right? Like, on earth as it is in heaven, but like how the kingdom of God is both here and not yet, because we understand what that redeemed and full perfect state is like, we also have to recognize how it's not that now. And those are the justice issues that we have to acknowledge. So I'm really
So
glad you,
I'm
sorry.
sorry.
No, you're good.
Nope.
I'm
Go
done.
ahead.
That's my thing. I was going to ask more questions. So I want to hear what you got to say.
Oh, no, I just wanted to draw a correlation here, because again, I want to make sure. Well, one of the things I'm trying to make sure of is that for people listening, this conversation is not cast in the light of like politics. So I'm trying to maybe have some
I mean,
conversational liberation from that. But
fair enough.
but really, what I'm trying to say is just to get more to the point of what some of this is talking about. I want to draw a correlation. So, like when I lived in East Africa, uh, I took a few weeks and I traveled around Tanzania, which they don't get a lot of Western visitors at the places where I was. And so everywhere I went, the clothes didn't fit me very well. The food was very different. No one really spoke the language. And the little bit of language that I knew, I couldn't really communicate very well. Some people, I was constantly reminded wherever I went that I was the outsider.
yeah.
Nothing really fit. And so it seems to me that Black Liberation Theology is sort of addressing like, no, like it's not about you feeling like an outsider because you're not an outsider. And so we have to adjust the way we portray this stuff, the way we talk about God, even sometimes the way we do worship, because we don't want, uh, because we can't have people feeling like outsiders. Like we're all equals here, and we have to be able to adjust a culture that way. But also as it relates to the social work of it and the justice part of it, like correct me if I'm wrong, because I'm trying to cast this in a slightly different way so that people who are are not from like a minority in the states can maybe have a better way of
So our
seeing
white
this.
listeners.
Yeah. So like how it addresses social issues that you guys are talking about would be like, me living in Tanzania and having people come alongside me and be like, you know what, maybe we should make some changes here so that you don't feel like such an outsider. And the ways that you're feeling left out, maybe we could help, adjust some of the way that we like, maybe sometimes the way we make clothes or the way that we even, enact law enforcement, because that was a thing I had to encounter a little bit. And Jordan, I've told you those stories before of, sometimes being singled out and actually like coming home and being afraid of law enforcement because of my experiences there, because, a white guy, you're always going to be a prime target for cops over there. So, um,
Hello, so Ben, you had a black experience of America over in Kenya? No, oh my!
yeah,
I'm
well,
sorry. I know
that's,
you don't want to make it political, but
no, I mean,
it,
but
Well,
that's
I mean,
my
how
but
is
that's
it?
my point though, is to just say, these aren't outlandish things, and sometimes we have to hold a mirror up and realize that while they might seem extreme, they're really not. Because it's not just. I'm just trying to draw a correlation. That's all I'm trying to do.
I think
So, but let me know if
so
I'm being a
good.
little unfair and a little, with that, because I'm not the one who's getting a doctorate in Black Liberation Theology. So maybe this is a pretty bad connection I'm trying to make. I don't know.
well, I'm Jordan. I'm gonna let you go because I think you're gonna say what I want to say.
Sure.
So you go ahead.
Well, I was going to tell you, Sylvester. I don't think you were making anything political, and I think it's fear. I think we're okay. One thing I want to challenge our listeners, and maybe I'm being too radical, and I Ben, if you have to cut this out, cut this out. But I think we need to stop talking about race in terms of politics.
Yeah.
Like I think it absolutely needs to be done with, and it's been sad to me that it's been leveraged. I'll accuse my own party as a left leaning individual, strongly left leaning individual, that we have at times like leveraged and used the African American community in order to gain votes, to gain presidents and traction, and even to some extent placate like white voters who value those kind of things. You know what I mean? Like there's an entire movie about this. If you ever watched the movie Get Out, the movie is literally just like a it's not even a passive aggressive. This is an actively aggressive jab at white liberals because of like the whole
Right.
like, yeah, we want to feel good about it on the inside, but we don't actually want what we're asking for. You know what I mean? It's kind of like when people pray and they're like, Lord, take this from, like, Lord, make me into this person, but not today. You know what I mean? Like, you ever hear those prayers, or you ever seen those jokes online where people are like, you know, Lord, I want to be like this, or like take this sin away from you, this burden away from me, but like not today. You know what I mean? Like, you know what I mean? Like, because I want
Yeah.
to live with it and I like it. But my whole point is simply this, that like I think we got to get past that. So Sylvester, I don't think you brought up anything political per se, as much as you
No.
just acknowledge that maybe there's a difference in our experience. And I think if we take it at face value and we stop trying to like make it something different, and I really want you both to speak and critique me here, like, and this is what I wrestle with. So I need you both to talk to me about this. In some ways, in an ideal world, it is possible that Black liberation theology could theoretically work itself out of a job. And what I mean by that is that we could adjust our general cultural theological language to where that would actually be the norm rather than an outsider. Having said all that, I'm not sure, one, the reality of that possibly happening, and two, if that's even a genuine goal or not, or even if that's a realistic approach to any kind of theology in general. So you'll have to correct me on that. So am I touching on anything good or positive here, or am I really missing it, Sylvester or Ben? And nobody, yeah,
Ben,
I brought politics up for the
yeah,
record.
Ben, you go ahead. You go ahead.
No. Say what?
No, I'll say you go ahead. Go first.
I mean, oh, jeez.
I know that was a lot of stuff. I'm
Yeah.
just trying to
No, I'm
wrestle with some
just,
stuff real time. So I'm
yeah.
sorry.
I mean, I
no.
mean, I resonate with it. Yes, you go ahead, Sylvester.
So and because you're okay. So what is at the heart of the question, Jordan? Because you said some
The
really good stuff there, and I'm gonna like touch
maybe
on everything.
so yeah, I guess. So the heart of my question is, how do I, because this is what I want to, what I'm trying to be aware of is what I call my blind spots. Like I don't understand what it's like to be black in
Mhm.
America. I have no idea. And it's normal for me to think of Christianity in the terms that I do. And like education goes a long way. What I'm saying and what I'm asking is it, am I devaluing Black liberation theology by saying that any kind of liberation theology to some extent is trying to work itself out of a job, which is to say that it's trying to liberate not only the people that it's trying to liberate specifically, like so in your case, like Black Americans or even blacks in other countries, but like moreover for any kind of liberation theology, liberate people like me from using that language and even the icon, like the iconographs, right? The icons we use of the white Jesus, like liberate anybody from the bondage of like a type of a religion that has for I don't have a better word. This word is a buzzword. I don't like to use it, but like othered people, that is outsider, that is excluded people, made you an outsider. What Ben said, like it's liberating all people from that to some extent, but it requires
Yeah,
buy-in. So like it's working itself out of a job in the sense that it's trying to get everybody to buy in. And if in a perfect world, if everybody did, there would be quote
right.
unquote no need for that kind of specific liberation. I don't know. I don't know.
And
Well,
so,
oh
okay,
no.
Ben, you go ahead.
Oh no, I was just gonna say, part of that's an interesting conversation to me because on one level, it's like you sort of have that cultural influence and you can't get rid of it, and I think there's something fine there. Like God
Yeah.
does honor, we do have cultures. Otherwise, we would be justifying going into, a church in Korea and saying, "Oh, you can't have these images; they're too Korean looking. We have to get rid of that." And so you actually end up creating uh, sort of sort of this weird result of God has you can't represent God at all in any sort of physical
Mm,
medium, and that might be too much. But maybe I'm thinking too much into it. But I'm just saying, like, part of me wonders, and I'd be curious to hear this too. I guess I'm just adding in my own addition to the question
Mhm.
is, I know it's like maybe working yourself out of a job, but is it? Because I feel like there's a lot of those curious points that add these complexities to it and these little nuances, and maybe it's more about just helping people process these things and maybe better finding out where those lines
Mhm.
are over it crosses over into like, yeah, that's too far though.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Well, for me, when I love how you guys say work itself out of a job, because I don't see it that is to work itself out of a job rather than to make the church be the church.
Mm. The
That it was
actualization of what it was intended to
the
be. Okay,
actualization of the
that helps me.
and Jordan, you would definitely understand this language of the invisible church, right? Of the Catholicism
Oh,
as they believe.
sorry. Yeah, no, I
Yes,
just hit
yes,
me.
this invisible church, type of notion. So, it's once we get this form of first of all, we have to bring the language of liberation theology back into the church,
Hmm.
of the understanding that before it becomes Black, Korean, Eastern Africa, whatever, African, at first the gospel is liberation theology at its heart. It's to liberate us out of this darkness, to liberate us out of this the gospel is literally that Jesus saved us, from the by his death and resurrection. So liberation theology, we first have to bring that language, so that liberation theology, therefore the language does not become a little, how you say, make people feel eerie. It doesn't make sense in the
Yeah,
church, because it's like, well, my pastor never talked about that. We never use that terminology. You talk about the concept, but you never use the language. So now the form of when you hear the form Black Liberation Theology, you don't know how to take it, because first you don't even know what liberation theology really
Hmm.
is.
fair enough. That's true, actually.
That's a
You
yeah,
see,
that's a good point.
and so before we talk about Black liberation theology and working itself out of the job, work itself, out of the job, it's first like, let's bring liberation theology back into church and really talk about what that really is and how it's that seen. So when we bring in Black, then to answer your first question, Ben, you said the position of like, okay, I don't know, this was your question, but like, how do I, as a rural lay member of a church in Grant
Yeah.
Park, Illinois, that every time I drive down there to go preach, okay, I'm not going to bring that up, but they're waving certain flags, okay, so now they're waving certain flags and stuff like that, so that this is a particular different type of community. Now, Sherberville have somewhat, out of 7, 8 years that I've been there for a long time
Yeah,
now
you
because
have.
of preaching
Yeah,
best
because I was
program.
there. I was there when it
So
started. Yeah, I remember when you started.
yeah, so I've been there a long time, and because of my presence, my Black presence, Sherberville has been on the standpoint of sounding almost liberal, and they're not
Not
liberal.
at all.
Hmm.
That church is
They're not
not
liberal.
liberal.
And because I'm starting to have the conversation with them, and now what I did was, and this is very important, and I hope your listeners hear this: pop your bubble. Pop your bubble. What do I mean by that? We have a tendency to be in our bubble. Okay. When I came to Olivet, I had a bubble, and Olivet popped my bubble, and I didn't like
Probably
it.
pretty dramatically.
Yeah, very dramatically. Like, I was trying to find a way to leave Olivet. Seriously, because when I went to, now remember, I'm Black. I come from a Black Baptist church, so we clap and we dance and we do, and then I go to chapel, and
The
what I
organ.
hear, boy. I'm like, oh my God. I said, I called my mom. I was crying. I said, Mom, they singing like, I don't know what they're doing. And people just, I don't know. It was very dramatic for me. Traumatic. And so here it is that I needed that bubble to be popped in order for me to now be comfortable to be in areas and conversations with those who I might not understand, but it will bring some type of substance to my life. Normally the same way. Grew up in a Haitian bubble. She's Haitian. So we're both black. I'm Black American. She's Haitian American. Grew up in America. But in South Florida, though, she was around Haitian people.
Yes.
Her dad was, we call him the Haitian Bishop of America. I mean,
That's awesome.
any Haitian guy that you can think of, he probably know. Any Haitian pastor you can think of, he probably knows it. Okay, but then normally had interactions with black people, black Americans, but until she married one, she didn't see. Now her eyes are open in a way that have never been open because now I have pushed her and then pop her bubble and say, but what about this? And she have popped my bubble. So I'm just continuing that form that, you know, for us to be comfortable with Black Liberation Theology, you cannot continue to have the conversation and not having a black person at the table.
Mm.
Does that make sense? Like
Yeah.
you having conversation. Okay,
Yeah.
but I understand the
Well,
worry.
it's like the same thing of. Oh, sorry.
No, I was going to
Uh,
say, and I know the worry of, well, if we're just bringing them in just to have the conversation about black people, then it was, feel like they're being taken, which, yes, I don't like to be brought in just to have the conversation about race, just to have the, conversation about
Well, that's
racism.
tokenism.
Just
It's
to
not
have
even
the
like it's not
conversation.
Yeah.
genuine. Yeah.
Right, I just don't want to come to it. But at the same time, when you bring us to the table to talk about those things, make sure you bring us to the table to talk about the major decisions that needs to be done within the church.
Yeah. Well, that's
You
like
know, bring us.
that's the same conversation I have about young
Yeah.
adults, where churches are like making decisions about what to do with young adults, and I'm like, but you're not talking with them. They're not a part of the process. So how are you expecting this is going to work?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Everybody want to beat up on the young pastor, but it's like, when the last time you talked to us to really understand
Yeah.
what we coming from,
So
rather than just, oh, y'all this and y'all that. And I don't know if y'all dealing with that, but we're dealing with that a lot in the black church of
yeah.
beating up on the young pastors and young preachers.
Uh,
So,
but it's like the
but like I
same
said,
thing. Then you're right. Like, why are we having these conversations about race, but no one's actually talking about the people who have a different experience with it?
A room full of
Like
white
it's
yeah,
people are
weird.
like, how do we solve racism? Like,
I'm like, do you see a black
no,
person here? See a Hispanic person? No, I don't. So why are we having this conversation?
I don't know.
right.
Keep doing what we're doing. Like,
And
sorry.
so then the question also then comes, Jordan, which I'll say you were very, when I was at Olivet, you was very intentional about that, and I thank you for that, and I honor you for that. That you were not afraid to bring me into your spaces, home. You brought me to your home and
Yeah,
things
you did me my.
as a black, right,
Yeah, I forgot about
as a
that.
black man that in some cases that, and I'm not saying they never saw a black man, but they probably never saw a black man physically, not your home, but I'm just
Yeah,
saying
I know what you mean.
for example. So it gets to the place of, well, what do I do, Sylvester? There's not a lot of black people that live around me. Well, you don't think you know a black community that you can go serve in? Oh, because serving, okay, I'm going too bishopy, but like, because if you serve in a community, now you have now established a relationship that trust can be built. Be careful always trying to come in and say this is what you're doing wrong when you have not established no trust.
Yeah.
And a lot of people have a tendency to do, this is what's wrong with them, and this, and it's like, first of all, who are you?
Hmm.
Hi. Also, what?
Right? It's like,
Like,
it's like, are we intentional about having ministries that serve in these urban areas? And really to understand. So, okay, Olivet used to do, what's that week?
The missions
Mission,
week.
mission week, mission trip week, or
Yeah,
Yeah, I think it's
I know what
called
you're
whatever.
talking about. I don't know what it was
a
called, but
mission
yeah,
week
they'd
or whatever.
announce the mission trips and stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, and they used to have a group go to the South Side of Chicago
Mhm.
for a week.
Why? Why is
And
that such a hard thing to do? We live south of Chicago. You just get on 57.
Yeah.
you, thank you, Jordan. You driving right home what I was going to say.
I didn't
Why
realize at
did
the time when you said it, I was like, oh God. Like, oh wow. Like,
it's like, why did it take a special week for a group of college students to go and serve in a community that is only an hour and 30 minutes away? So I feel like I'm talking too much. So you guys go ahead.
no, man.
Nah, you're good.
I was thinking
So
of, yeah,
thank you guys.
yeah, man, that was good.
I mean, it's true though, right? Like churches, it's hard to do like you almost have to make it a special thing because it's not just a natural part of church culture,
Yeah,
you know? Well, Sylvester, thanks so much for joining us on this one. Man, a lot of really great stuff. I'm going to be thinking about this for a long time, and we will definitely have to follow this up again.
yeah.
So, yeah.
I
To
mean,
those listening, thanks for joining us for all of this. Be sure to like, share, subscribe, leave a comment. Let us know what you thought about it. What do you think about Black Liberation Theology? I'd be curious to know those thoughts.
Sylvester, do you got anything you want to plug before we disconnect?
no, I want to. I mean, Ben, he opened a big can of worm. I want to see what the comments say too.
You just want to see the comments?
Yeah, so I will be hanging in the comments too, and if you have questions, I will answer them. If it's pretty nasty, then I'll let Ben and Jordan take care of
Perfect. All right. Thanks. Well, you guys all know the drill. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time.